Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Stout Dawi against the Dark Elves on the map Karak Ongor. So for my composition this time around, I did want to go fairly wide and try out a whole bunch of different shooting units in conjunction with each other. So we didn't bring any artillery, but we did bring, as mentioned before, a bunch of different shooting, and so we needed to skimp somewhere, and really the core I suppose was the Lord. We did decide to run the Rune Lord. The Rune Lord, stripped down, is fairly cheap. He doesn't require too much expenditure to be competitive. He is, however, on the mounted on the Emblem of Doom here, which allows me to bring Locus of Power, which means I can get plus 15% magic resistance on all my dwarves. And that's actually really useful. It means your dwarves have 40% magic resistance, which means that against spells that your opponent might bring, and there are quite a few different Dark Elf spells that could potentially damage your dwarves a decent amount, they will be very, very resistant to that. I also did bring Master Rune of Grungni, which is a nice 40 meter, 20% missile resistance, and that's of course good against Dark Shards. Rune of Hearth and Home for that immunity to psychology, once again useful when dealing with the Dark Elves. Though in my situation, as I'm not really running many units susceptible to psychology, it's not necessarily the most useful, but it can definitely help my shooting stick around a little bit better. The Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin just for damage, and Master Rune of Negation. Personally, I don't think the Master Rune of Oath and Steel is particularly useful against the Dark Elves, because Dark Elves tend to have a lot of armor piercing in their compositions. Alongside that, I do have a Thane with the Tormentor Sword, as well as the Rune of Stromny Redbeard, which gives me a significant boost to melee attack and some boost to leadership in 40 meter AoE. On the other end, we do have a Runesmith stripped down to just the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, as well as the Rune of Negation. So once again, getting those resistances up, hopefully resisting the enemy armor piercing pretty well. My front line is composed entirely of Longbeards, backed up by a single unit of the Grumbling Guard, giving me a little bit of armor-piercing punch in the front line. And behind that, we do have 2 units of Slayers just to shut down enemy cavalry if they try to dive on my back line, which is pretty significant. We do have 2 units of Thunderers, one on each flank. Iron Drakes with Trollhammer torpedoes here in the center. They're really there to shut down enemy dragons and that sort of stuff if they try to push in. My opponent, for example, brings a Death Hag on a Cauldron of Blood. These guys will do an amazing job at just shutting her down. And then we do have the Ulthar's Raiders for their debuff as well as their high armor piercing DPS. For my opponent, he did decide to bring a very interesting flank heavy build, and this is definitely potentially very dangerous to dwarves. For his lord, he actually brought Malekith on foot, which has definitely caught me by surprise a little bit. Generally, when you see Malekith, he is mounted on Seraphon, and sometimes you'll even see him on a chariot, but this time around, nope. He is bringing Gaze of Malice, he's bringing Stand Your Ground, and he does have a whole selection of spells, including Soul Stealer, Doombolt, Blade Wind. Well, actually, I do believe he has all of his spells, Power of Darkness and Chill Wind, so it does look like he has all the spells from Lord of Darkness, and it does allow him to get Spiteful Conjuration, which can actually be pretty effective against dwarves. It's a 15 armor debuff for nearly 20 seconds. Malekith himself is a passable melee lord, definitely nothing amazing, but against the fact that I have a Rune Lord, both sides are kind of equipped with a lackluster lord as far as just straight up combat goes. Alongside that, he does have a Reaper Bolt Thrower just to apply some armor-piercing long-range pressure. A front line composed entirely of somewhat veteran Oblique Swords, and these guys are not particularly great. They won't do amazing against Longbeards, but they can definitely time down and absorb shots. And then our unit of Hargoneth Executioners, who of course can hew through my infantry with contemptuous ease. These guys have very good melee attack, melee defense, and a significant bonus against infantry of, I do believe, 14, which makes them really, really powerful. Then on the flanks, my opponent really has what's probably his main damaging contingent. He has the unit of Shades with dual weapons over here, more Shades with dual weapons over here, and finally the unit of Dark Riders with repeater crossbows all the way out on the flank. And he does have a Black Dragon up in the air, so definitely something to pressure my backline with, and definitely something I got to watch out for. Now, right off the bat, I knew this wasn't his complete army, and I was suspecting some Shade play, but I wasn't exactly sure where they were, and I definitely needed to shut down this Reaper Bolt Thrower before it did too much damage, so I started pushing in against my opponent immediately. Now you can see some normal kind of Bolt Thrower shots going in, doing a little bit of damage to the Longbeards, but nothing too fancy, and I'm going to open up on the Hargoneth Executioners with the good old Thunderers, who should of course shred them pretty effectively. Over here you can see the Shades are definitely whittling down the Longbeards, but in a straight up fight the Longbeards will be able to smack down the Bleak Swords pretty effectively. And over here you can see, while there will be a Dragon Breath used on my Thunderers and definitely hurting the not just the Thunderers but also the Dragon Breath Slayers, I'll still be able to start returning fire on the Black Dragon and force my opponent to make a move with it. Meantime, the Ulthar's Raiders as well as the Iron Drake Torpedoes are shifting to engage, and Marked by Ulthar has now hit the Black Dragon, which will make it much more vulnerable against the massive shooting I have. Thunderers do take a nasty hit there, but shortly thereafter the Slayers are on the way, ready to engage the Dragon, tied down in melee, even as the first axes are coming in, and you can see the Trollhammer torpedoes are just going to be engaging on it, and you can see the poor Black Dragon just getting absolutely annihilated. Over here, Chillwind does hit the the poor Longbeards, but as you can see, the dragon just does not stand a chance. It gets annihilated by a mix of throwing axes and troll hammers. Over here, the bleak swords are being absolutely trashed, and the Harganeth Executioner is actually getting hit by a Master of Wrath and Ruin, which is annihilating their HP pretty effectively. Over on this end, the Thunders did manage to zone away the Dark Riders pretty effectively, and my opponent has not been able to get his Shades quite into action in a timely manner. You can see they are engaging now on the Slayers. The Slayers are definitely a squishy target, but they do actually have a shield save of 35%, I do believe. So they're actually pretty good at just they're actually pretty good. It's 30%, I suppose, at just kind of soaking up that sort of damage. Over here, you can see the Harganeth Executioners have failed and kind of fallen apart. They're dead. My opponent has gotten his murderous prowess, but that is going to be fairly useful in this situation. Useless in this situation, as he is simply being overwhelmed by a whole bunch of stunties. At this point, he's down to just his bleak swords and a handful of dark shards. Meantime, the Dragonback Slayers are just pushing into these shades, even as the Thunders tee off on them and are doing some pretty brutal damage. Over here, the Rune Lord is in hot pursuit of Malekith, and alongside the Runesmith, as well as a whole bunch of Longbeards and the Thane. So really, my opponent's army has been reduced quite significantly. You can see some Dark Riders over here with the crossbows picking away at my Thunders, definitely causing a little bit of damage, but I'm just ignoring them in favor of focusing down the Shades. And my opponent has kind of slipped on his micro a little bit here, and that has ensured that my Slayers got on top of his Shades. And while Slayers are not meant against infantry, they will definitely do a good job chopping up lightly armored units like Shades in a straight up fight. Especially Dragonback Slayers, because they do have built-in physical resist of, I do believe, 25%. It might be a little lower. It's 20, actually just 20%, but still 20% physical resist basically means they're about as survivable as Shades and just straight up fighting, and they do have a significantly higher weapon strength at 55. Over here, the Thunders are causing some major damage to these Shades over here. Of course, the Slayers are unbreakable, and they're actually pretty quick. They can basically catch Shades, especially if they're not too tired, which right now these guys are just winded, whereas these Shades, well, actually the Shades are fresh, but they're just winded, so it's not too hard for them to keep up. And over here, you can see the Ulthar's Raiders are raining death and destruction upon the Shades, causing quite a bit of hurt. And in the meantime, the Trollhammer Torpedoes are now opening up on the infantry. Unfortunately, the Trollhammer Torpedoes didn't get much done. I kind of mispositioned them after finishing off the Dragon, and I really probably should have tried to use them to zone away these Dark Riders, and really missed an opportunity there. But unfortunately, at this point, or fortunately for me, the game does end with a Pyrrhic victory. So a pretty quick game, but it was a lot of fun to just try out some of the missile damage. As you can see with this build against, if your opponent is not able to shut down your backline, which my opponent really wasn't able to do with the way he built up his army, you can annihilate large units very, very quickly. That Dragon went down like a 9-pin in basically just 2 volleys from the Thunders, Ulthar's Raiders, and Trollhammers. So they're definitely very potent, definitely something you got to watch out for. On top of my opponent's build, I definitely think he would have been better off trying to get a few better armor-piercing units in there instead of the bleak swords, or perhaps dropping the Dragon in favor of something, or in favor of multiple sort of disruptive units to get into the backline and shut down my own shooting. Definitely, the Shades are potentially pretty potent unit. Personally, against Dwarves, I do prefer the Shades with great weapons. I think they're good in the late game when you might be forced to fight, or you might be forced to fight your opponent. One of the important things also to remember is that the Shades, when they engage the Dragonback Slayers, they take the Dragonback Slayers, of course, do have their speed debuff, and that means that the Shades are actually very, very susceptible to just getting torn apart. They're not actually able to kite the Dragonback Slayers if one of them gets hit, and that means the Dragonback Slayers can just stay on them and chop them to bits. My normal unit of Slayers actually didn't do very much at all. They basically stood next to my Dark Riders for most of the game, screening them, or stood next to my Thunders for most of the game, screening them against the Dark Riders, diving in, or against potential flanks from my opponent or anything like that. So definitely that was a little bit of a waste on my part, just not really utilizing the Slayers all that effectively. Otherwise, just a fun little battle. It was fun to just try a whole bunch of shooting. Definitely a bit of an expensive build. In general, I think going a little cheaper on the front line might be better. And when I say cheaper, I don't necessarily mean not investing as much cash, but trying to spread things out a little more by getting perhaps Dwarf Warriors or Miners rather than Longbeards, who are, of course, well, psychologically or immune to psychology, these guys don't have. They are rather relatively expensive in comparison to Dwarf Warriors or Miners. So definitely it was a bit of a fun game, and it was fun to see, try to kind of deal with a bunch of Shades. It was fun to try out the Iron Drakes with Trollhammer Torpedoes. They did a great job against the Dragon, though they kind of lost their usage in the later game. And yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions, or anything like that, be sure to post them down in the comments below. One final little thing I would actually like to mention actually is that the Hargoneth Executioners are good, but I think it's important to bring multiple units of them, because otherwise the single unit will just get focused down. In this situation, I was able to focus down very heavily with Thunderers, followed up by the Rune Lords, Runes of Wrath and Ruin. So despite the fact that these guys will potentially just hack through a unit of Longbeards with ease, when they are debuffed so much, they're just not really able to perform up to the key, and they just get smushed. They still actually managed to get 15 kills in, despite the fact that they were fighting Longbeards. They'd been hit by debuffs from the Rune Lord. They were getting hit by Rune Master and Wrath and Ruin. They'd been shot up by Thunders and all this sort of stuff. And despite that, the fact these guys still raked in a few kills, so definitely something to look out for. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said before, any comments, criticism, down in the comment section. And as usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.